All right, welcome back to the Weekly Boost Podcast, episode 40 already, and our second kind of themed episode for the month of May with our partnership with the American Cancer Society, joined with one of our favorite guests to date, Kassidy. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's exciting. I'm glad we can get this going and hopefully we saved some content to talk about in this one.
Yeah.
We just wanted to wish you a happy birthday again. I know May birthdays, I said, were the best, and you just celebrated one this past week, right?
Easy.
Yeah, correct. Of course. Thank you.
Yeah, Star Wars Day, but more importantly, Cassidy's birthday. So
yeah.
Well, last time we talked to you, you were just getting started with like workouts and practices for basketball. So why don't we start with that? How was that kind of crazy season you had?
Yeah, crazy is accurate, I would say. We only had about 3 actual games and a scrimmage, and sadly those 3 games were against the same team. So definitely crazy and interesting season, to say the least. It was pretty short, but I think it was cool that we were able to make it for what it was. I think practicing with masks on obviously sucks. And, battles with COVID and stuff, and we were getting tested a lot more. So at least we finally had the opportunity to get tested so we could play. So that was cool. Mm-hmm. But now that we're done, it was like, okay, we're done doing this. Like, we're ready to move on. We're ready to play a real season again. And this summer is, I think, really crucial, bringing in new upperclassmen and just kind of getting a new team set and ready to go for what games are going to look like post-COVID wise. So
for sure. I don't know if you guys have summer tournaments. I know in the past you had, but like you said, it would be nice to move past that and start to have a cohesive team with a traditional schedule, because 4 games doesn't really, it's nice. I don't know I think you guys won all 4, or the scrimmage in the 3, right? But translated to a bigger season, it'll be a lot better and a better experience for everyone.
Yeah, I agree. No matter where you're coming from, I know even our starters, they're competitive. Like, we're all competitive. We want to play, but even having the freshmen come in, it's really crucial during that time in that first season, just to get it under their belt and help them get to know our language, our team culture, our offense and defense and stuff like that. So yeah, I feel like we're going to come in and kind of, some are still going to be learning and some are just ready to go. So,
well, I've been having, discussions with the baseball team and coaches, and it's a really unique situation having freshmen that missed out on their senior year of college or high school, sophomores that missed out on the freshman year of college ball. So, there's a lot of, luckily for you guys got to play somewhat and started to practice, but on the other hand, the baseball team has gotten almost all their games in. So it's interesting now looking forward and some of the inexperience of incoming freshmen and how that translates. And I'm sure that's applicable to basketball as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think sometimes we definitely forget, that those freshmen haven't had that season. Like, they didn't get a lot of things, and that's really sad moving forward. But as well as the ones staying here, I know some are coming back that for next year, because that's available to them, which is great. But it's also just a weird timeline. Like, some haven't played in over a year, and our short season was very short. And then baseball, a lot of spring sports are playing now, but they're the ones that got that taken away from them first. So if anything, it's just really cool to have them play more games than us and support. And if anything, it's only giving others hope for after this season and next year. So.
Yeah.
Do you guys travel like before the season starts for, like a preseason? I haven't really paid too much attention to stuff like that, but do you guys go anywhere like in a normal season?
Yeah, so normal season, we travel a lot during the summer. So tournaments in the Dells, wherever we can pick up. We have open gyms here. But preseason wise, we typically just stay around here. I know you can't have that contact with coaches really a lot. So it's a lot of just getting up and down and getting in strength and conditioning with the coach that they have here for us. And then just kind of kicking it off on the first day of practice, kind of get right into it.
Yeah, I'm curious because of a lot of teams do sort of like preseason trip where they go down and play games before the regular season kind of starts. And I just remember with our experiences, the spring trip in February and March, going down to Florida, playing in the warmth, kind of rejuvenating everybody, getting them ready to go for a season. And it's exciting to know that could be on the horizon. I don't know, how that correlates with a lot of other sports because, fortunately basketball's played inside, as like, the regular facilities and stuff like that. So the temperature and weather thing doesn't really make too much of a difference, like for games and stuff. But I just think that's going to be a nice little kind of revival of that because it's been almost 2 years. Well, it's 2 years since anybody's really gone anywhere for a spring training or anything like that, or like a preseason venue. And I think that just helps a lot with kind of what we're going to talk about later, but just maintaining like focus, right? Because you have that long off season or that long stretch of practices where you're not really playing anything, doing anything that's like in a game or exhibition setting. And you kind of lose focus of, okay, that's actually what we're trying to accomplish here is having competitiveness and all that sort of stuff. And you don't get that as much as you can scrimmage and practice with each other, like on your team. It's not the same as going to battle against another team because they're doing the exact same thing. They want to get ready to beat you guys and you want to get ready to beat them. And you can't find that, having to practice with the people that you practically live with all the time and, like doing that stuff. It's a different kind of competitiveness that I think it starts off as that like beginning of the season kind of games that you play, like test the waters, feel out positions, all sort of stuff, and jump starts the end of the regular season. So I'm wondering maybe, when a lot of the stuff is coming back to normal, if more sports are going to incorporate a little bit of not like a welcome back kind of a thing, but just getting people to move around and play and like try to jumpstart competitiveness again, because I feel like it's been hard to maintain that.
Yeah, I agree. Even with scrimmages, I know like at the beginning of our season, those exhibition games that you're talking about, we have some that don't necessarily count for that record, but it helps us just, play in other colleges. Yeah. Like you said, kind of getting a jump start on, hey, we're here to play. And like, this is our practice chance to do it against girls other than ourselves. Because I know this year that was the biggest thing was we're kind of sick of playing each other.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Practice whenever that's all we could do. So yeah, hopefully we'll see more teams kind of just pick up and also just play for fun because we went through a time where we weren't playing. So we should be able to pick up those games all the time, no matter what sport you're in, and play against each other.
Yeah, I know in years past, at least the program's gone to St. Louis, California for games. So I like that notion you brought up, Austin, where there's like you hope that there's bigger tournaments that bring teams together and kind of, not like it's for fun, but hey, we can finally do this. Like, let's make it the best out of, our opportunity now that we have, so.
Yeah. That's kind of like what you live for. Like you, especially as an athlete, it just drives your competitive fuel even more, wanting to, compete in these team filled tournaments where they may or may not count for the regular season, pushing you that way. But like, I know we do the crossover for baseball and like that, it counted, but in a way it was just a way to play, the Southern Division, right? Mm-hmm. And kind of just introduce us into new opponents and possible opponents in the postseason, just something like that. It made it different than what it was playing, Lloyd, Lawrence, Norbs, like all the time. And
well, and this year they
non-conference games.
This year they're 6-game series too.
Yeah, and so it's just monotonous, right? Like as much as it's as stupid as it sounds, but playing the same people over and over again, it just gets old because you start to just sink into habits and expectations of what the other team does, and it doesn't really progress you into becoming a better athlete or becoming a better competitor because you kind of not take it for granted, but you're used to it. I'm a firm believer that like the new and unknown brings forth challenges that make you a better person and like make you like figure things out for yourself, and that drives progress. And I feel like it as kind of a weird comparison comparing that with sports, it means something. Like always playing the new opponent, you kind of have a chip on your shoulder, but at the same time you're like, we don't know what to expect. Let's be our best, and it just drives competitiveness, I think, 10 times more than sadly playing each other in the gym or playing each other on the diamond.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I always got sick of seeing the same hitters in the cage, so I can only imagine what scrimmaging 5v5. Like, there's got to be some rifts that happen. It's 3 weeks into practice and you're getting fouled, and but well, and you also just finished up. Well, I don't know. What do you have left in the semester? You have a lot of things, or basically wrapped up?
For me,
Yeah.
yeah, we're this week's finals, so I know my
Okay.
last was on Tuesday. A lot of people
Nice.
are done leaving again, so
Yeah.
one more final.
Yeah, I was in my last class of the semester on Wednesday, and we were joking like like we had a really bad snowstorm that like canceled classes way back in February. That feels like 3 semesters ago. Like this semester itself was just dragging on. I don't know. But
Well, April didn't exist. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think April existed. I just don't remember anything happening. But it's funny you mentioned that, like the dragging on sense, like especially these last couple of weeks. It might just be for the idea that graduation's on the horizon for me, but like trying to find stuff to like stay focused and like kind of orient myself back into, you know, the realm of not being done with something that I spent 4 years doing, right? Like you get that feeling of accomplishment, which everybody should, like when they're on the cusp of graduation or they're on the cusp of like a promotion or anything like that, like kind of a sense of accomplishment. But when I know me personally, when I feel that sense of accomplishment, I kind of like shut everything else that kind of got me there, like that process part out. And I know that's not necessarily good. And so I guess with this end of semester, you know, on the horizon, and it's already here for you and I, Kassidy, and Ben, it's obviously you got some papers and stuff you got to type and stuff. But do you have anything for us, like on how you've been able to like kind of just, you know, get through these finals without like losing focus of what's on the horizon and stuff like that?
Thing I can't say I've always been the best at it. I think we're human, but I know something for me is just with the drag on, we haven't had that spring break. You didn't get that time, and so I think I've noticed something that both of you each had 2 different views on was then you're like it dragged on, like it seems like it's been forever, and then on the other hand you're like where was April? Like I don't it just went by so fast. And I think oftentimes with any type of process that we're going through, school related, whatnot, whenever you're in it, that drag, even through COVID, you know, back to my treatment time, like I think whenever you're in it and you're going through it, that time does seem to drag on, and you're just like pushing, you're hoping to see the light at the end of the tunnel kind of thing. And sometimes that's what you want, but I don't think you can always focus on that final outcome. But then also you turn around and once you finally get there, you're like, wow, I made it. Like you're ready to move on, but you kind of forgot, like there was a time where I was living during that process and it felt like the most longest time ever. And you're just dreading to get to where you're at now. And I think oftentimes for myself is just trying to remember how I felt during that time and be appreciative of the fact that, you know, that night I stayed up till however 2 a.m. working on that paper, but I did it, and this is why I have the joy or the accomplishment that I have now. And that's with anything that we're looking back onto, I think.
Yeah.
Kind of an off-ball question. Do you believe in the phrase time flies when you're having fun kind of a thing? Like, I know it's off-ball, but like we're talking about how time feels to us, I guess. I'm curious.
No, I think so, because that's also something that relating to, so you said whenever time flies by, whatever, you're having fun, and it's because you're not thinking about time. And I think oftentimes, even though whenever you have something dragging, it's like, okay, now I'm thinking about time. And so obviously that's not. So whenever I'm like digging deep in work, well, 3 hours can pass by, and I'm not saying working on the paper is fun, but it's whenever you kind of set your mind to thinking not about the time related experience. Whenever you're in that present moment, I don't think we oftentimes have that time mindset. So I guess you can look at it either way.
Yeah, I mean, time's all relative anyway, right? And you said being present in the moment is all the more important. We've talked about it before, Austin, that the like flow state. You just get in it, and you just next thing you know, it's 4 hours in, and you know you got 6 pages done, or you know you just went through a marathon baseball game or whatever it is. It's a weird concept. It really is.
And it's kind of funny when you start living those old proverbs, right? Like the time flies when you're having fun, or I just had one at the top of my head and I can't think of it, but
nice.
It's funny. Yeah, that's great, right? Don't you love that when you're on air and you kind of lose it? But it's funny that you start to realize these things when you're going through it. And when you're thinking about, well, graduation is, 3 months away at the beginning of this past semester, you don't think about oh my gosh, it's 90 days. Like, I mean, I didn't anyway. It was like, okay, well, I'm going to try to make tomorrow a better day and all that sort of stuff. And then you get to it. It's like graduation's in 6 days or whatever. Like you're like, that's a really quantifiable time that you can like think about. Like 90 days, I can't plan that out.
Yeah.
But I think it's because it's so close to the present that you're like, I need this done. Like, I need to get this done. I need to get it over with. And I don't know, Ben probably can attest to this about, our podcast, but like planning stuff out for me anyway is really hard for this, just because I try to be a present focused person, and you do too. And I'm sure Kassidy as well, but I don't know how to like manage that with this, because like graduation is something that's a culmination of 4 years or 5 years for some people to get their undergraduate degree. Like, how do you put that into, the last week of the 4 years, right? Like, how do you handle that? That's kind of what I'm feeling right now anyway, and expressing that in a really run-on way. It's just, it's weird because you don't really get to see, a 4-year goal or a 10-year goal come to fruition that often in your life that you set yourself to. And I guess that's one of the great things to be proud of as a graduate of college or graduate of high school, right? Like it's something that we put a lot of effort into, and you don't really prepare to experience it, right? You prepare to kind of get it over with. If that makes sense. Like you don't know how to feel.
That's a good way of putting it. And I mean, I'm the only one of the three of us that's kind of been through that, and you will be in 6 days, Austin and Kassidy, next year. It's you're absolutely right. I didn't think about it how you framed it, that like all of a sudden you're done. Like it's just like a sudden moment. Like as soon as you finish your essay, whenever it's due, you're just like, that's it. Like I'm done with my undergrad. Like what?
Well, you're exactly right. Like seeing people like post stuff like they just finished their undergraduate degree on a Thursday night at 7. It's like maybe because of circumstances this year, but like that's it. Okay, you walk it.
Even like receptions too with like the biology department. I remember it was like, okay, this is it. Like I'm never gonna like see most of these people, or it's all the more reason to enjoy something in the moment. And like you said, Kassidy, even when you're kind of going through it, whether it's treatment or loaded up on semester projects, or like I noticed you just finished like the Catalyst program too. Like as you're doing all that and balancing everything, you kind of have to appreciate it in order to think, like you said, look back on what got you to that Thursday night at 7 o'clock, like Austin said, and you've hit submit,
Yeah. Speaking of Catalyst projects, what was yours? I'm curious, Kassidy, what would you have to do?
Ours, our title is called Turning Up the Heat with Paralysis. And so it was focused on, our topic was the waste. And so because of COVID, we worked on how to properly dispose of the PPE waste.
Nice.
Okay.
So kind of getting it away from like incinerators. Obviously, there's the cloth masks that everyone can use, but ultimately in medical or just anyone practicing, playing games, we all wear these things.
Yeah.
So there were so many of those, and not biodegradable, just gonna be sitting there, and obviously incineration, bad for the environment. So thank goodness I had some other biology and chemists in my group and kind of helped us work through that paralysis part. So.
Yeah, I'm happy you brought that up about like the environmental impact of like everything going on, because obviously, and rightfully so, we put issues on the back burner for really pressing matters that are affecting our society. And obviously the pandemic was affecting people's health, and that's the number one priority. And so you don't think about, well, what are the economic consequences? What are the, environmental consequences and all that sort of stuff. And now that we're kind of, crossing our fingers that we're getting around the bend with everything, thinking about, what is the amount of single-use plastic? Like how much has that increased because of everything, trying to maintain cleanliness and like hygiene standards, exactly what your project's about with, PPE. I know there was a heavy push for reusable and kind of like washable masks and stuff like that at the beginning, kind of throughout the pandemic and stuff like that. But, the N95 masks, they're not supposed to be, reused. And so those have to get, thrown away every time. And nylon gloves, not nylon, it might be not nylon. Cut that one. Nitrile, that's the word. It starts with an N. But yeah, like how are we going to deal with that? And that's a great question that, our generation is probably pressed with, is how are we going to kind of circumvent the consequences that, that we're going to face, primarily with, the environment, because that's something that we're never going to be able to kind of reverse what happened. We can't take back the time and the time and the, destruction that we caused. We can only kind of amend the future.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
I would say something to add with that real quick is just going through this project. Obviously, Catalyst is something I had to do, but it's also a very pressing matter that, we need to start thinking about that looking ahead. But just going through it, I'm pretty sure, like, Ben, with your history, and then obviously Austin, like your biology department, both of these fields, I'm not the best in or the most interested in all the time, but I know going through this, it's really made me think, like, we are living through this history now. Yeah. And so in the years to come, we're going to be talking about this pandemic, and it's just so odd to me because it's weird to think about, like, okay, I know 20 years from now we're going to talk about this, but this is big history that's being made right now. And just kind of looking back, like kind of you said, the environmental factors in the years to come. Yeah. Some of us may be thinking about it right now, and I think it's good to plan, but we aren't going to see those effects until many years down the road.
Yeah.
So that was just really different perspectives for me that's not always interested in those two things to bring about and I guess raise more awareness about for people. So that was interesting.
Yeah, it's well, I just finished up my paper for that public health course I was in, and it's really interesting and striking the reverberation of certain themes into today. And you said it best, like we're like living through a really historical moment that hasn't affected the globe in this way since arguably 100 years prior. So it's for a lot of us, or maybe our listeners, we were too young to remember something like 9/11 or like other really like the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan kind of were drawn out, right? Like it wasn't like a singular moment. Something like 9/11 is in the history books, and this certainly will accompany it when someone does a 21st century unit and talks about the crazy year that was 2020. And I think it's really good that you and so many others are kind of recognizing it and understanding how you felt. Because another thing that's really interesting is like history and memory, and how memory gets shifted throughout the years, and understanding how we know or understand it now, the pandemic, and how it's going to be moving forward is really key. And no matter how many takeout plastic forks you used, like things like that are going to affect us, like you said, years down the line. That in the present moment, you need those masks and everything, but who knows how that's going to affect us down the road.
And again, another great point that you're bringing up that kind of just off the cusp, I guess, with our conversation, but it actually pertains to something that I said I wasn't going to talk about, but I'm going to, because it arrived on topic of conversation. I had to read a book called The Black Swan by Nassim Taleb, and he was kind of a little footnote for him. He may or may not have predicted the 2008 housing market crash that started, obviously a bunch of really bad economic downfall for the world. And he talks about it in the book, The Black Swan, the impact of the highly improbable. And so we bring up the idea of 9/11 and kind of the idea of the hindsight is 2020. Well, if there were locks on the airplane doors before 9/11, then somebody could, it would have been an event avoided, right? Well, then you lose sight of what it caused and all the stuff going on with it. So you can't really say if the locks were invented, stuff like that. But getting into what the Black Swan is, and the pandemic is a really great example of that. And so a Black Swan is an event that is an outlier. It is of great impact, and people try to make sense of it in their goal of trying to gather all of the known information about something, even if it's completely unknown. So we try to make sense of whatever happened. And so I feel like we're in a moment right now where we're trying to make sense of something that, people saw coming, but didn't see coming in the magnitude that it did. And we have to try to, make amends really, and try to understand it in the best way possible. It's a great read. We had to read it for a class here, but it has a bunch of other stuff talking about mediocrity versus extremism when it comes to like what you want to do for your everyday life, like career choices and all sorts of stuff. It's a good read when you're right at the end of your undergraduate career and you're like sitting there and you're like, wait a minute, I should be doing all this stuff instead of watching golf videos on YouTube. But I'm just happy that you guys brought that up, because it's a living moment of history, like you said, Kassidy, that we're going to have to try to explain in the best way possible. And unfortunately, we're going to have to try to explain what the right thing that was done and what the wrong thing that was done to people that didn't live through the experience. And that's going to be difficult because obviously varying opinions, the further polarization of our political atmosphere, just the world itself is going to be a completely different place when we have to try to explain this event and relate it into our lifetimes. And so I think it's not a fun challenge, but a challenge nonetheless. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, for sure. It'll be really challenging because it'll bring up some really passionate opinions on things.
Yeah.
And that trauma from lost loved ones and some of that other stuff, attitudes about decision making and things are going to get brought back up, and it's going to be a touchy thing for years to come. And then I feel like there'll be that point, X amount of years down the road, that it'll be okay. Now we can kind of evaluate in a reasonable manner. But until then, we'll just hang in there and watch golf videos, like Austin said.
That's right.
Whatever.
Instead of studying for finals. If
whatever you got to do to
listen
procrastinate.
to this, no, you didn't listen to this. If you're my professors. But,
well, we were able to, set this up at our busy ends of semester with Kassidy, just because we know she's passionate about, what we're kind of working with the American Cancer Society. And I don't want to turn this discussion into a repeat of our prior episode. What was that, 20 something? I don't even know. It felt so long ago.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to talk a little bit more about, your experience mentally in your headspace at the time, if you can, take us there, because, I remember talking about this the first time. You're able to kind of, how did you say it? Make yourself vulnerable, but seem strong on the outside almost, you know what I'm saying? Like that whole kind of theme. And that's really important. And if you can kind of take us back to, your experience and ways that you were able to maintain kind of this, stoic kind of mentality, and that you're, as soon as you find out, you're like, I'm going to beat it. There's no other option. You know what I mean? Sorry, that was a convoluted question, but
you're good. Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to think. And like you said, I don't want to repeat too much of last time, but
yeah,
it's a really important topic. And I guess just going through, kind of bringing it back towards thinking about treatment time and everything that's gone on, is from last time to this time, or last time I was on, right to this time I had a class, and one of the videos we were talking about was that week's topic was related to trauma. And I actually watched this. It was on YouTube. It's a video. I think her name's Rhonda Cohen.
Okay.
I'm not sure how you say her last name, but anyways, the only reason why I bring this up is because I just did a take home on my final exam for this, and basically asking what's one thing that really stuck out from you from that course, and talking about psychopathology. Out of all things, this is the one thing that stuck out to me just because it related to me the most. And basically her video is, I know she is a survivor, one of 3 survivors from a helicopter crash, and I think she ended up getting captured, held at gunpoint, all of these very traumatic events that happened in her life. And something that I really took away of what she said and what she faced is, people were asking, I'm not sure if I could do what you could have done, or you are so strong to make it through what you did, and I don't think I could have done that. And I know these are 2 different extremes of going through a treatment like cancer like this compared to what she did, but I think we can all kind of relate to this in some way of trauma in our lives. Is whenever someone is going through stuff like that, I related to people saying, oh, you are so strong, like you got it. I'm not sure if I could have done that. Like you've done such a good job out. I don't think I could have. And I guess I was just listening to what she had to say and also kind of relating it back to my own personal situation. And it was, I appreciated people saying I'm strong and saying like, or making me feel like I was strong because that's something that they didn't think they themselves could do. And then after watching her video, it kind of made me think, well, I kind of feel bad for them now looking back, or, you know, even going through messages of seeing people say that, because it makes me feel bad that they think that they couldn't have done that, because what else was I supposed to do? I know
Yeah.
I wasn't at a stage 4. I didn't have a terminal illness. And there isn't anything else people like that could do in those situations. But in mine, what else was I supposed to do? Like, I was gonna fight, and if I wanted to survive, if I wanted to play basketball again, if I wanted to get back to school, like that's what I had to do. And so to me, that was just an obvious answer. And I guess in her situation too, like we all have this, I don't know, instinct of survival within us. And I could say, oh, I don't think I could make it out like in some random forest by myself for a week or a month, but do I really know that? No, I have no idea, because I've never done that before. And so kind of what she's saying, she goes back into some basically mental toughness talk. And with our team culture, that's what I'm all about. It's what I want to go into, is sports psychology. And so I loved that right away. But her main thing also was, it's not what happens to you in life, it's how you think about it. So if she were to sit there and think about it, the moment that happened, like, oh, I'm not going to make it, or oh, I'm fearful, like those negative thoughts just eat your mind up and basically, I think, shorten your life. And so that's with anything, whether or not you're in that situation, or if it's one thing after another, just many different life events. I could sit here and feel sorry for myself, or for things that have happened to me in my past, growing up, now doing this, like COVID hits, that could be a huge thing tacked on to someone else's life that's already very, maybe just lots of hardships in their life, and that could have been one thing. But if they were to focus on how negative that was for them, I think they're not going to get anywhere from that, and be able to focus about moving on and getting past that situation. As to where if you were thinking positively about, okay, maybe this is the last hardest thing I will have to face, and the best is yet to come, basically, kind of thing. So talked a little bit longer there than I planned on, but that video was really
stuff.
fun. That's a lot of what I felt like during that time, is I just had to think positive.
Well, that's good stuff. And I'm taking some of the stuff that you're saying, like what struck me was like when people would say like, I don't think that I'm strong enough, or like, talking about like, I don't want to say it's building empathy or like a sympathy kind of, phrase that people use, where they try to position themselves in kind of a lesser state in order to, kind of gratify or make somebody feel good about themselves in a little bit. And I mean, obviously it's almost always out of kind-heartedness and, like just wanting to be there for somebody and showing support. Do you have any idea? I know you're talking about like sports psychology, and so like the whys and what ifs kind of questions are always, brought up in that sort of topic. But why do you think people say that? Like, is it, fear, or like, what do you think?
Yeah, I honestly think it's exactly kind of what you just touched on, was it's such a natural thing, but I think they also see it as they are trying to explain. I don't know of any other words to say to make that person feel like they actually are strong, and that basically they are just super proud of that person for making it through those tough times. And so I guess now, just after kind of what I've learned, is in a way they are lessening themselves, or kind of self-talking destructively about themselves, of thinking that they couldn't do that, with no plans of ever having to do that. So I would never wish that upon anyone. I don't want anyone else to have to go through that, or think like, oh yeah, I could do it. But I know something, I think that I will say, I think separates myself from most. There are some things where I look at others and I'm like, okay, if I got put in that situation, I think I could do it. Like, I have the confidence to do that. And others just aren't thinking that. So I'm not sure why. This is amazing stuff that I want to dive deeper into and kind of get a better understanding of why we either subconsciously or consciously think this way. And Yeah, I'm not sure, but that's definitely stuff that I'm interested in why we set ourselves up, I guess, for that. And
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think I just saw this somewhere, and I don't know how obviously valid it is, but it was somebody on some platform that has a lot of like people behind them following it, kind of like in a motivational sense, was like somebody else has gone through this and bodied it, kind of like they embraced the chat, like they embraced it and they did it, and like kind of the idea of just positive self-talk, I guess, is where that's coming from. It's not kind of relating to a certain circumstance, but just having that mindset that like maybe if I educate myself on like what that actually the person's actually going through and like understand like, okay, that's a more empathetical way of talking to somebody and supporting them, instead of like detracting from my own self-worth and self-value and like
yeah,
how I think of myself in order to just say something in order to give the other person, some
yeah,
sort of support. Like maybe I just don't think that that's something that on the fly people can do just because we're social beings. But it's, I completely agree. I think with what you're saying,
yeah.
I
I
just,
think
yeah,
I think if it we us three, but anyone just bringing more awareness to that,
yeah,
um, just conscious effort of maybe even just for anyone listening, I think things to say to people whether or not they are going through cancer treatment or any other life circumstances that are traumatic like that is maybe think about and prepare yourselves or read up on something, find an article, do something about that negative self-talk and like kind of putting
yeah,
yourself down to explain how proud you are or emphasize to that person of how strong they are. Maybe just understand, like, I know it would have been interesting that if I don't always want to speak up, maybe on a vulnerable sense of how I'm feeling about that, or yeah, okay, I might have made it look, I wouldn't say easy, but just in a way that I was always
yeah,
positive that entire
Mm-hmm.
time because I wasn't. But am I want to say that? No, not really. And I'm not sure how
yeah,
many of those are, but creating that vulnerability or even just asking questions of like, wow, I see you are strong, but have you always felt that way? Or what's been your
Yeah.
hardest challenge? Like kind of creating conversation and asking that person. Maybe saying I'm proud of you is always great, and
yeah,
telling them how you feel. If you think that person is strong, okay, tell them that, but try not to bring yourself into it. I guess ask
yeah,
more
Yeah.
questions
yeah.
relating to
Yeah.
that person.
It reminds me of just like a topic that I covered in a class here called Providence, Suffering, and Freedom, talking about the role of like religion and like empathetical views of suffering and all that sort of stuff, and the role of theodicy, which is like using God or like defending an action that happened on earth in real time to somebody else and like explaining it in a way that alleviates the people that aren't technically suffering, but they're like grieving with the person that's suffering. So it's like a way to like further victimize the victim without like inherently wanting to do that. It's just it's how the words come off and how the the connotations with the words were like it's when you hear at certain situations, well, it's like they're better off kind of a thing, or they're in a better place. That like those words, although as kind-hearted as they appear and like as they are said at the time, don't necessarily console the person that's actually suffering or make that person
Yeah.
actually suffering feel better about it, because they're again kind of detracting from the purpose,
Yeah.
but not intentionally. Obviously it's
No.
not like an
Yeah.
intentional thing, and like what we're talking about with like the positive and negative self-talk, it's not almost ever a intentional thing. It happens when we say it unconsciously because we're just so used to wanting to make other people feel better, I
Yeah.
guess. And it's a fallacy of human existence if we're kind of getting like deep, because like we
Yeah.
just want to make people feel better, but then when you
Yeah.
break it down, we're like, oh, wait a minute, this might actually not be the right way to do it. Maybe we can find something better. And I'm glad that you talked about that, because that relates to a lot of the stuff that we at St. Norbert teach as it's kind of like busting the stereotypes with like religion. It's just one way to look at it, I guess.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. It's like the knee jerk reaction when especially with something like cancer too, because it affect what is that stat you used last week, like 1 in 3
Yeah, 1 in 3
people,
people will
right?
be
So
affected, either diagnosed or family
yeah,
associated.
chances are people know what that experience is like. But it's interesting, what you bring up, Cassidy, that sometimes it's I don't want to say it's just another message, but at the same time, it's like it isn't really like really getting to you, where like you could have a conversation about something else that takes your mind off of, treatment or being in the hospital. And then, that almost helps you more so in some cases. But it really is an interesting thing. Like I didn't know that about the, better place thing and what
Yeah.
you're talking about, Austin. Like that's super interesting that, despite our best intentions, it's often, not the result isn't exactly what, we're intending for. So.
Exactly. And it's just always misinterpreted. It's not like as if it's, an intentional use of either religion or just, social conversation. It's funny how that happens, right? It just comes up and people actually understand and experience something. They're like, wait a minute, that didn't make me feel better, even though it was supposed to and intended to. And so stuff we have to work on as a a social being that is the human race. So
it's also interesting too, like this idea of re-victimization that you talked about. Like in history too, it's like trends in the way history is written lately. There's like a really big debate over, how historians talk about certain traumatic things in history, and how is that re-victimizing people? Is that giving too much power to those that cause trauma and oppression, especially like in things with slavery studies and other instances? That is it. We talked about it in my race and gender in early America class. Like it's a really touchy thing that you don't want to, re-victimize and have trauma come up again in certain instances, especially for ancestors and things like that. But how do you talk about those types of things? It's a fine line oftentimes.
Yeah.
But
Kassidy, do you feel like whenever, like, Ben, you bring up a great point about like the re-victimization thing, but like I know when Ben and I talk about like other, like, I know it's not of the same magnitude, but like talking about like a sports injury or like a historical event that happened to us or a life experience, do you ever feel as if like talking about it in a, like, having to revisit it, does it do anything like in a negative or positive way? Like, do you learn more stuff about your past experience with your cancer diagnosis, your treatment, and like your recovery and all this sort of stuff that maybe the last time you told the story or last time you talked to somebody about it, you like didn't you didn't think of or anything like that? Do you ever experience that?
Yeah, for sure. I'd say both, sometimes in both the positive and the negative way. And the main thing is probably looking back through pictures. I think of where I'm at now, and the longer I am going from, post-treatment wise, is sometimes just looking back strength-wise, I'm like, wow, I didn't realize I was like that because I was for so long. And now until I've started getting better, I don't fully realize that. So that's kind of like, I guess that's a good thing, but also seen as like in a negative way is just like, I didn't fully feel that because I just guess I wasn't so focused about that in that moment because I was just focusing on getting better and trying to do what I could and living in that positive, I guess, mindset during that time. That oftentimes now I realize my mindset, I wouldn't say it isn't always not, I don't know if I just contradict myself. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily a negative thing to look back on and think about that now, but I think it has been very important for me to realize and feel that now because I didn't feel that then. So if anything, I think looking back, or kind of like you said, retelling a story, or, talking about hair. I know as females, that's been one of the biggest things. And everyone's like, oh, your hair's getting so much longer. Well, I just had a first haircut like a couple weeks ago in 2 years. And how I felt about that moment was very different than how I probably would have talked about it a year ago because I probably wasn't too happy with it. But I always have that saying in the back of my mind during that whole process was, at least I'm growing hair right now. Like kind of just stuff like that is kind of covering up for that. Also, just as well as I'd say, just relationships, friendship wise, during that time was the bonds and the connections that I made then was probably over FaceTime because I have 6 hours from nothing. And kind of looking back over it now, I've liked asking friends questions if they didn't mind bringing it up with me of of what they saw or like what was happening here and what they thought about the experience that I was going through, because it's all about perspective. And so I think like it's been really interesting learning how they felt during that time compared to myself whenever I was the one actually going through it. So yeah, a lot of that comes up a lot.
Yeah, I think you make a great point about how every time you, regardless of positive or negative, when you revisit a situation of your past, you recognize the little things that made it, right? Like you focus on the big picture, right? Like when you're going through the stuff is like you want to get better. And so you kind of just focus on that. And that's a really big overarching goal that you want to focus on. And then obviously here and there, like little things add up or, subtract from that and kind of make it, but you don't realize that because obviously you're driven to get better, or you're, in anything really. And so I always notice, like whenever I reflect on something, it is those little things that you remember that make the bigger picture better or worse.
Yeah.
Hopefully better, right? But it is. I'm happy you mentioned that. Like it is the little things. The little things matter. As cliche as that sounds, it's funny how every time we have a conversation, we talk about stuff like this, about the what matters, right? Like we always ask that question, what matters? And the 2 times that we talked, you kind of get a good idea of what actually matters in life. So I love that.
It's always the little things, right? That
it is.
It's the little things. It's the process of doing things that really make that reflection on an experience what it is. Well, I know it's end of semester and we're all busy with projects and papers and things, but have you been able to look into more books? I know we talked, I think off air last time about personal development books. Have you dabbled with any of that lately, or?
Yeah, I don't remember if we talked about that last time. It was probably after the recording.
Yeah.
Like
the 2 hours. Yeah, the 2 hours after.
We exchanged Goodreads, and I've actually shared it with an assistant coach here, and I'm like, oh yeah, have this, put any on there, like so that I can see too. So I've got a long list on there. Obviously, I don't know if this is weird or if I shared this last time, but love books. And I also even like, you asked about Netflix before we started this one. I have a hard time. I shouldn't say I cannot, because I feel I'm just choosing not to read and watch shows during the semester.
I can't.
I have a hard time. However, I can often find myself watching videos. Like you said, for studying.
Yeah. So right. It's ease of access. That's what it is.
Yeah. So but yes, obviously looking forward to the summer. A few self-help ones that I've got listed up, and I think as well just some other stuff that I found throughout this course, like kind of more learning wise. I know I like the self-help. I like any motivating ones. I think that one about Matthew McConaughey, you guys said that.
Yeah, Green Lights.
Yeah.
I've really been interested in that. I've seen many, since we've talked many times, that one be highly reviewed, highly recommended.
Sure.
So that one was a big one. Just typically, I guess, that I wouldn't really find myself reading into on the path that I go, but yeah, definitely some of your guys' recommendations have been helpful.
Yeah, that's my working out book I listen to. I haven't really gotten into it too much for Green Lights, but in the summer I'm gonna kind of take a couple weeks off of reading, and then
because that's all you do, man. That's like what your major is.
Yeah. But after that, I'm excited to get into something that isn't required of me to read.
Yeah.
But
I actually, that's one thing that I'm happy that you brought up again. Wow, I keep saying that, broken record. But
and one thing that you took mine too. But that's all right. Keep going.
That's right. When we get information from sources that we least expect it from, and pretty credible information, like you look at Matthew McConaughey as an actor, and his versatility as an actor in numerous roles, from like Dallas Buyers Club to Dazed and Confused to Interstellar, like 3 completely different characters, and the guy can do it flawlessly, right? And then he goes and writes a book that can change people's mentalities about who they are and stuff like that. It's funny how that works, because you never expect somebody to do that. And that's one of my goals, I think, of the summer, is to find more books from people that you least expect to have insight or, accreditation and stuff like this, and understand them. Because so far from what I've read from that book, I have learned more about not how to become a better person, because I don't think that's what he's trying to teach. I think it's how to make the best of situations that you deal with, and like obviously to make red lights green lights. That's the whole premise of the book. And just find more like that, because it again, never thought I'd read a book by Matthew McConaughey. I thought I'd watch a movie by him. Like that's what I'd associate it with, or like
or vote for him if you're in Texas.
Yeah, exactly. Like you don't ever expect these individuals in life to come up with something that you actually find more valuable than what they're actually known for. If that makes sense. Because I don't know. I think that Matthew McConaughey is strictly as an actor, not an author, and I come to find that I find his, what he writes down in a book more valuable than how he performs on the silver screen. So it's kind of interesting.
Well, Cassidy, you said, if that course was psychopathology or whatever it was, like you don't know you don't know those really key takeaways until you go through the class. I've had it a bunch with, different courses at Ripon or wherever it may be. You don't know what you're going to really take away from that course. And that's kind of the beauty of learning, I think.
Yeah.
It's the uncertainty of it all. And, 10 years down the road, what are you going to learn from public speaking? Don't skimp on the sources. That's what I learned. So not 10 years, but feels like it.
Rest of your life, you're going to deal with that one.
Yeah, no kidding. Do you have anything else fun planned for the summer, Kassidy? I know it's approaching.
It is approaching. No, I'll be staying here at Ripon working at Wellmore front desk still this summer, and working at Muscooten Golf Course over in Berlin. So
nice, yeah.
Looking to get outside a little bit more.
Yeah.
You mentioned our sport's always inside, and I like being outside. Very outdoors person, and so just looking forward to those two things. Kind of playing here, having open gyms, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Working towards that very hopeful and optimistic season.
Yeah.
So
you get to be around it, enjoy it for the months that you weren't able to. Even if you're just working the front desk, it's a beautiful facility, and take advantage of it for sure.
Yeah, if you're working at Muscooten, just let me know, because I'll go golf there. I've been there once, I think. So, but it's close. That's why I say that.
Put those golf videos to.
Yeah. You'd think, right? No, I'm a terrible golfer.
But yeah, cool. Again, if you're able and willing to donate to our GoFundMe, we'd really appreciate it. We're a fifth of the way there. With some more, I haven't donated from the shirts that we sold either. That being said, we're down to, I think, 12 or 11 left. Now, so they're kind of going fast, and Austin's wearing it. I'm wearing it. I'm really happy with the logo. They're pretty nice. I'm a little biased, but
they're nice. I was pleasantly surprised. Oklahoma Shirt Company, you guys did amazing.
Yeah, really great job. Kassidy, do you have anything else for us before we kind of sign off here?
Not a whole lot. Just, I guess, thanks for having me on this. And I know, obviously, for the viewers, I highly recommend to support their GoFundMe and get yourself a shirt. This month is, just cancer awareness with them pairing up with American Cancer Society. Highly recommend. I think one thing, I know I listened to you guys' last podcast, just a little bit of background information on that kind of stuff. Not only do they do a lot of things cancer research wise and other stuff that is kind of raising awareness about for this month, but just from a personal standpoint, you guys talked about Relay for Life at one point. There are just so many of these things that are very crucial, and some things that these survivors stick to and rely on some of these things, and helping them out in ways not only during that time, but I know more so for after too, is just having that background there. So raise awareness here, and just kind of everything you give really does a lot and goes as far. I think what you guys are doing is great, and it's awesome that you guys have pairing up with them for this month. So
we appreciate that. More themed episodes. We have 5 weeks, maybe not all of them will be themed. We'll see what we want to do with some of our episodes in the bank ready to be published. But thanks again, Kassidy. It's always a a treat to talk to you. So
Yeah, it's always an excellent conversation. We always are able to pick each other's brains, and
yeah,
it's a lot of good conversations. So
so
thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
yeah, stay tuned for next week.
Yep.